If you've been on a certain side of the internet, you've probably seen memes about this weird Mickey Mouse-esque character in some weird Middle Eastern show. Thing is, if you're trying to do any sort of research about this show, it'll literally drag you into a whole different rabbit hole. In fact, I'm going off of a script that I wrote about 7 to 8 months ago. I literally meant to cover this show months ago, but I just never got around to it. But I guess there's no time like the present. Some people might see the show as some short-running little Mickey Mouse knockoff show that maybe had no real impact on anything and only ran for like a few episodes. Maybe the show's relatively normal with maybe just some slight references to slightly more mature themes. But in reality, it's way, way worse than that. And that's why, for the sake of this video, I'm going to pretend as if you, the viewer, has a baseline knowledge of the Gaza war. Although it's not really too relevant to understanding what makes this show so bizarre, as just looking at the show will suffice. Tomorrow's Pioneers was a 2007 children's television series that lasted for 4 seasons from 2007 to 2009. But when getting into the first episode, let's get a few things out of the way. This guy right here? Yeah, that's not Mickey Mouse, that's Farfour. The first episode actually revolves around this character getting caught speaking English. I hope to be good time. And it's really entertaining, actually. Just seeing this grown, very ginormous man dude getting beat up, just seeing him sit around a bunch of kids and everybody pretending as if he's just another one of the kids is just so strange and almost gives me Cool Cat vibes, actually. This little girl right here, her name's Sarah, and you're gonna have to get used to seeing her as she's basically one of the only consistent elements of this show. She serves as the co-host, and she might as well be the actual host since every other co-host she has ends up dying. Oh yeah, I'm not joking. Actually, for Farfour here, he gets replaced pretty fast. It's so strange that he's basically like the main guy that people meme on when he's basically killed off almost immediately. Besides, between you and me, Assud the rabbit is just a much more interesting and compelling character overall anyways. You might be wondering, why was this character even killed off in the first place? Well, it all has to go back to Disney, and Disney threatened to take legal action if they didn't stop using their character, which is so strange to me, as I don't know how the hell you can threaten to take legal action against people who are already breaking the law by even broadcasting the show in the first place. Circumstances surrounding Farfour's death are quite interesting in and of themselves, as it almost plays out as if it's like some weird bizarro version of Kingdom Hearts. And that might sound strange, and you might be asking the question, what the hell are you talking about? But I don't even know how to explain it. I actually remember making an English dub version of this back in the day.
You'll pay for what you did. All of you will pay. All of you will pay a dear, substantial price for what you did.
Back in the day, it was like 2 years ago, but still. Farfour goes and meets his grandfather, who seems to be just a very normal human man. But here's where it gets weird. When Farfour goes to meet up back with his grandpa starts going on some sort of anti-Semitic tirade. And it's weird. I'm still wondering how old Farfour's supposed to be. I mean, he's in a class with an 8-year-old girl and a bunch of other little children, but he's very clearly big. And he towers over his grandpa. His grandpa actually ends up dying, even though it's never explained why. But before he dies, he ends up giving Farfour a key and some land documents. This will come in handy later. See, before Farfour's grandfather died, he started talking about how the Palestinians owned the land before the Jews and all this other stuff that I don't want to get into because I'm not trying to get political here. But see, here's where it ends up becoming relevant to the actual plot. Because Farfour actually refuses to give up his land documents to a Jewish man even when offered money, which ends up getting him killed. As the Jewish man ends up beating him to death, literally. And that's how season 1 ends. But the show goes on for another 3 seasons, so what happens? Well, they end up replacing him pretty quickly with his cousin Nahoul. Nahoul is a B, which honestly, I don't think those two are in the same family tree, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. But before I move on to Nahoul, it's probably pretty important to mention that Farfour's death at the time was a pretty big deal. I found this pretty unfunny Comedy Central bit at the time, and also Chet Uger talking about it, and this is probably the only time I've seen Chet Uger say something that's even partially truthful.
Now, you might think, oh, they canceled the show. No. That's not how they roll on Al-Aqsa TV, okay? No. He was killed.
Nahoul is a strange character. In his introductory episode, he starts out by praising his cousin and talking about how he's gonna go and continue his cousin's legacy. But in, the next episode, he starts throwing rocks at lions and abusing cats. I'm not making this up. This dude just starts abusing cats. In my opinion, I don't think he's anywhere close to an interesting protagonist. He just sort of just does nothing throughout the show. He actually ends up dying as well because he couldn't get to an Egyptian hospital to get medical treatment because of the Israeli government. Again, we are greeted with another cursed scene where this ginormous character is supposed to be a child. So weird. Although, I almost cried. This scene is so incredibly strange, yet it is sad to see this little character just die. Them desperately trying to resuscitate him is just kind of sad. I know that it's a shitty show and that it's literally made for infants and that it promotes literal terrorism, but I mean, come on. He didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve this. Nahoul did not deserve this. Yet, despite how sad or not sad Nahoul's death may have been to you, it didn't take very long for him to be replaced with his brother, Assud. How are they in the same family tree? None of this crap makes any sense. Assud kind of represents when the series stopped giving an F about hiding or trying to sanitize themselves. At this point, they literally don't care. They just have this character be Farfour times 10. If you thought Farfour was bad, this dude is about 10 times worse. In his first episode, he manages to go on an anti-Semitic tirade that would put Farfour's grandfather to shame, as he threatens to get rid of the Jews and eat them up. He then starts to beef with the entire nation of Denmark, which doesn't make sense until you realize that there were offensive depictions of the Islamic Prophet coming out of the nation, which, yeah, it doesn't justify this rapid threatening to kill people, but at least puts it into more context. P.S. I just want to note how harshly the wiki rips into him. I'm not saying it's unwarranted because it absolutely is, but I just find it funny that even his own wiki doesn't like him. As the third protagonist in this hit television show, he's actually put through the ringer quite a bit, and he does happen to go through quite a few misadventures of his own. One of my favorite episodes he appears in is the episode in which he meets up with his second grandfather. Remember, he has the same grandfather as Farfour, the one who died earlier. After meeting up with his grandfather falls asleep, and he is tempted by the devil, who looks like an anorexic version of Grimm from the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, to steal. And I don't know what the hell is going on here. This devil does not even look remotely intimidating. After he steals, the audience of children is allowed to call in, and basically every single one of them calls for him to have his hands chopped off. Sarah suggests they chop off one of his ears instead, and the absolute look of horror on his face is just absolutely priceless.
طيب يا نور في رأيك نقطع يد أسود الآن؟ لا لا إذا سرعت.
Although he's granted a second chance and allowed to live with both his hands and his ears. It was only a matter of time before real-world events caught up to the show. At the time, this show was not a little thing. It was a very big deal, actually, with even United States congressmen talking about it. This all culminated on December 29th, 2008, when the Alexa television station was bombed. Although the show actually continued, it's pretty clear that the people who made the show knew that this bombing was coming, and already left. Although this real-world bombing ended up killing off the fictional character of Assud. Yes, they literally wrote his death into the show. This is the third protagonist to die. In canon, the explanation for his death is that he was looking for artifacts within the Alexa television station when he was killed, which is just weird. And just like that, season 4 is over. I'll keep it a buck with you guys. I honestly don't even know what I'm talking about when it comes to the 5th season, mainly because there's really nothing out there for it. I searched for clips, I searched for a bunch of scenes, I searched for episodes. It was really hard to find stuff. And what makes it even weirder is that I've seen stuff saying that there's a 6th and even a 7th season out there. I don't know if that's true. And honestly, some of these clips might be from this 6th or 7th mysterious season that I just can't figure out. Again, most of this series is certainly lost media at this point, and it's just really hard to do research. And the wikis are just kind of strange, to be honest, as they just rip on the characters and don't really explain too much of the actual plot, as they are just character wikis after all. But a lot of these topics that have to deal with the 5th season are really serious, and so I'm gonna have to put a disclaimer at this point. If you decide to watch past this point, just know that it's not going to be all fun and games. It's not going to be a jokey video. I'm going to have to be a little bit more serious with the information I present. Season 4 introduces us to Nasur the bear. He's pretty strange looking and he becomes our main character from this point on. Nasur hints that when the kids grow up, they'll become suicide bombers and martyrs, basically hinting that it's inevitable. After which a kid calls in to sing a song, and it's honestly one of the creepiest songs I have ever heard in my life. With the song having lines like, "When we get martyred, we will go to paradise," and lines like, "I am willing to sacrifice my blood for my country," almost hinting as if the children have absolutely no choice in the matter. To make it even more disturbing, these children look so young, like they really shouldn't be in this situation at all, nor should they be introduced to this sort of propaganda. This is what leads us to, by far, what is the most disturbing episode of the entire series. Nasur and the children of Reem Rahisha. This is the most disturbing episode yet. So who was Reem Rahisha? Reem Rahisha was a female suicide bomber who on January 14th, 2004 entered an area known as the Red's Crossing. Sorry for my mispronunciation. She entered the Red's Crossing before blowing herself up in a bid to be the first female suicide bomber. And what ties this back to Tomorrow's Pioneers is the fact that they brought her children, her 2 sons and her daughter, into the studio to film an episode in which they reenact her suicide bombing. Yeah, this is insane. Actually insane. Now, season 4 does continue after here, but there's really no point in talking about it since nothing really deviates too much from the status quo. There's no other crazy weird thing that happens in the season that you haven't already been desensitized to or hasn't happened in a previous season. Surprisingly enough, though, Nasur is the only protagonist to get out of the show without dying. He never actually dies. Season 4 does have an abrupt ending and we don't even know what the finale for it is. Now, what makes this weird is that the show did somewhat continue, although I'm not sure if this was a completely different show that just used some of the same characters, or if it was some sort of spin-off thing, or if it was just a direct continuation, or what is even going on here. If you choose to believe that this is indeed a direct continuation of the original show, then that means the show continued up until about 2014. Now, I'm somewhat hesitant to say that this was the exact same show, due to several things that are just different about it. First off, Nahoul is surprisingly back. The bee, yes, Nahoul. That Nahoul is back, but he looks completely different for some reason. It's important to understand that at this point in the series, a lot of the creators who worked on it had already died. I also wouldn't be surprised if the original Nahoul suit was like a casualty in some of these bombings, and so they just had to make do with whatever the hell this is. I don't like his new look. But there's never any explanation for what happened to Nasur. Now you might ask, why would somebody try to continue this show if it ended? Well, this was an incredibly popular show at the time, so I wouldn't be surprised if this didn't even air on Alexa TV and was just some completely different thing. Even during the time of Tomorrow's Pioneers' initial run, there were knockoffs that were made. I think that there's one main one that people talk about, but I was looking into it and I think there was another one, but I'm not completely sure about that. Now, I had known about Tomorrow's Pioneers for damn near half a decade before I ever did any research for this video, but I always thought it was some small little niche thing that lasted for like maybe 10, 20 episodes that even most Palestinian children wouldn't have heard of. But no, that's not what it was. I actually remember first hearing about this show from a Blame It on George video from like half a decade back. Now, if you enjoyed this video, it's not completely over yet, don't worry. But if you did enjoy this video so far, I would appreciate if you would like and subscribe. By my last channel getting a decent amount of views, it never actually really went anywhere just due to the fact that most people didn't subscribe. But for my overall thoughts on Tomorrow's Pioneers, it's weird. It's creepy. There's really no way to describe this series. I'm genuinely struggling to come up with any sort of conclusion for this video. There's no moral, there's no lesson, there's really nothing. That's where I'm gonna leave it. There's nothing here. There's nothing you can say.